Hello friends, today talk about the history of United States, country in North America, a federal republic of 50 states. Besides the 48 conterminous states that occupy the middle latitudes of the continent, the United States includes the state of Alaska at the northwestern extreme of North America and the island state of Hawaii in the mid-Pacific Ocean. The conterminous states are bounded on the north by Canada, on the east by the Atlantic Ocean, on the south by the Gulf of Mexico and Mexico, and on the west by the Pacific Ocean. The United States is the fourth largest country in the world in area after Russia, Canada, and China. The national capital is Washington, which is coextensive with the District of Columbia, the federal capital region created in 1790. The major characteristic of the United States is probably its great variety. Its physical environment ranges from the Arctic to the subtropical, from the moist rainforest to the arid desert, from the rugged mountain peak to the flat prairie. Although the total population of the United States is large by world standards, its overall population density is relatively low, well as some of the most extensive areas that are almost devoid of habitation. The United States contains a highly diverse population. Unlike a country such as China that largely incorporated indigenous peoples, the United States has a diversity that to a great degree has come from an immense and sustained global immigration. Probably no other country has a wider range of racial, ethnic, and cultural types than does the United States. In addition to the presence of surviving Native Americans, including American Indians, Aleuts, and Eskimos, and the descendants of Africans taken as enslaved persons to the New World, the national character has been enriched, tested, and constantly redefined by the tens of millions of immigrants who by and large have come to America hoping for greater social, political, and economic opportunities than they had in the places they left. The United States is the world's greatest economic power, measured in terms of gross domestic product, GDP. The nation's wealth is partly a reflection of its rich natural resources and its enormous agricultural output, but it owes more to the country's highly developed industry. Despite its relative economic self-sufficiency in many areas, the United States is the most important single factor in world trade by virtue of the sheer size of its economy. Its exports and imports represent major proportions of the world total. The United States also impinges on the global economy as a source of and as a destination for investment capital. The country continues to sustain an economic life that is more diversified than any other on Earth, providing the majority of its people with one of the world's highest standards of living. The United States is relatively young by world standards. Being less than 250 years old, it achieved its current size only in the mid-20th century. America was the first of the European colonies to separate successfully from its motherland, and it was the first nation to be established on the premise that sovereignty rests with its citizens and not with the government. In its first century and a half, the country was mainly preoccupied with its own territorial expansion and economic growth and with social debates that ultimately led to civil war and a healing period that is still not complete. In the 20th century, the United States emerged as a world power, and since World War II, it has been one of the preeminent powers. It has not accepted this mantle easily nor always carried it willingly. The principles and ideals of its founders have been tested by the pressures and exigencies of its dominant status. The United States still offers its residents opportunities for unparalleled personal advancement and wealth. However, the depletion of its resources, the contamination of its environment, and the continuing social and economic inequality that perpetuates areas of poverty and blight all threaten the fabric of the country. The District of Columbia is discussed in the article Washington. For discussion of other major U.S. cities, see the articles Boston, Chicago, Los Angeles, New Orleans, New York City, Philadelphia, and San Francisco. Political units in association with the United States include Puerto Rico, discussed in the article Puerto Rico, and several Pacific Islands, discussed in Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, and American Samoa. The two great sets of elements that mold the physical environment of the United States are, first, the geologic, which determines the main patterns of landforms, drainage, and mineral resources and influences soils to a lesser degree, and second, the atmospheric, which dictates not only climate and weather but also in large part the distribution of soils, plants, and animals. Although these elements are not entirely independent of one another, each produces on a map patterns that are so profoundly different that essentially they remain two separate geographies. In the United States, most of the crystalline platform is concealed under a deep blanket of sedimentary rocks. In the far north, however, the naked Canadian Shield extends into the United States far enough to form two small but distinctive landform regions, the rugged and occasionally spectacular Adirondack Mountains of northern New York and the more subdued and austere Superior Upland of northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. As in the rest of the Shield, glaciers have stripped soils away, strewn the surface with boulders and other debris, and obliterated preglacial drainage systems. Most attempts at farming in these areas have been abandoned. but the combination of a comparative wilderness in a northern climate, clear lakes, and whitewater streams has fostered the development of both regions as year-round outdoor recreation areas. Mineral wealth in the superior upland is legendary. Iron lies near the surface and close to the deep water ports of the upper Great Lakes. Iron is mined both north and south of Lake Superior, but best known are the colossal deposits of Minnesota's Mesabi Range. For more than a century, one of the world's richest and a vital element in America's rise to industrial power. In spite of depletion, the Minnesota and Michigan mines still yield a major proportion of the country's iron and a significant percentage of the world's supply. The Cordillera's western edge is a Pacific coastal chain of rugged mountains and inland valleys, the whole rising spectacularly from the sea without benefit of a coastal plain. Pent between the Rockies and the Pacific chain is a vast intermontane complex of basins, plateaus, and isolated ranges so large and remarkable that they merit recognition as a region separate from the Cordillera itself. These regions, the interior lowlands and their upland fringes, the Appalachian Mountain System, the Atlantic Plain, the Western Cordillera, and the Western Intermontane region are so various that they require further division into 24 major subregions, or provinces. Andrew Jackson is supposed to have remarked that the United States begins at the Alleghenies, implying that only west of the mountains, in the isolation and freedom of the great interior lowlands, could people finally escape Old World influences. Whether or not the lowlands constitute the country's cultural core is debatable, but there can be no doubt that they comprise its geologic core and in many ways its geographic core as well. This enormous region rests upon an ancient, much eroded platform of complex crystalline rocks that have for the most part lain undisturbed by major orogenic mountain building activity for more than 600,000 years. Over much of central Canada, these Precambrian rocks are exposed at the surface and form the continent's single largest topographical region, the formidable and ice-scoured Canadian Shield. South of the Adirondack Mountains and the Superior Upland lies the boundary between crystalline and sedimentary rocks. Abruptly, everything is different. The core of this sedimentary region, the heartland of the United States, is the Great Central Lowland, which stretches for 2,500 miles, 2,400 kilometers from New York to central Texas and north another 1,000 miles to the Canadian province of Saskatchewan. To some, the landscape may seem dull, for heights of more than 2,000 feet, 600 meters are unusual, and truly rough terrain is almost lacking. Landscapes are varied, however, largely as the result of glaciation that directly or indirectly affected most of the subregion. North of the Missouri-Ohio River line, the advance and re-advance of continental ice left an intricate mosaic of boulders, sand, gravel, silt, and clay, and a complex pattern of lakes and drainage channels, some abandoned, some still in use. The southern part of the central lowland is quite different, covered mostly with loess, wind-deposited silt that further subdued the already low relief surface. Elsewhere, especially near major rivers, post-glacial streams carved the loess into rounded hills, and visitors have aptly compared their billowing shapes to the waves of the sea. Above all, the loess produces soil of extraordinary fertility. As the Mesabi iron was a major source of America's industrial wealth, its agricultural prosperity has been rooted in Midwestern loess. The central lowland resembles a vast saucer, rising gradually to higher lands on all sides, southward and eastward. The land rises gradually to three major plateaus. Beyond the reach of glaciation to the south, the sedimentary rocks have been raised into two broad upwarps, separated from one another by the Great Valley of the Mississippi River. The Ozark Plateau lies west of the river and occupies most of southern Missouri and northern Arkansas. On the east, the interior low plateaus dominate central Kentucky and Tennessee. Except for two nearly circular patches of rich limestone country, the Nashville Basin of Tennessee and the Kentucky Bluegrass region, most of both plateau regions consists of sandstone uplands, intricately dissected by streams. Local relief runs to several hundreds of feet in most places, and visitors to the region must travel winding roads along narrow stream valleys. The soils there are poor, and mineral resources are scanty. Eastward from the central lowland, the Appalachian Plateau, a narrow band of dissected uplands that strongly resembles the Ozark Plateau, and interior low plateaus in steep slopes. Wretched soils and endemic poverty forms a transition between the interior plains and the Appalachian Mountains. Usually, however, the Appalachian Plateau is considered a sub-region of the Appalachian Mountains, partly on grounds of location, partly because of geologic structure. Unlike the other plateaus, where rocks are warped upward, the rocks there form an elongated basin, wherein bituminous coal has been preserved from erosion. This Appalachian coal, like the Mesabi iron that it complements in U.S. industry, is extraordinary, extensive, thick, and close to the surface. It has stoked the furnaces of northeastern steel mills for decades and helps explain the huge concentration of heavy industry along the lower Great Lakes. Colonial America, 1492-1776. European colonization began with Christopher Columbus's arrival in 1492. The British Empire established 13 colonies along the Atlantic coast. These colonies played a crucial role in shaping American identity and independence. American Revolution 1776-1781. The 13 colonies declared independence from Britain, leading to the Revolutionary War. Early Republic 1781-1836. After the Revolutionary War, the United States formed a new government under the Constitution. Key figures include George Washington, John Adams, and Alexander Hamilton. Civil War era 1849-1865. The nation faced internal conflict over slavery, leading to the American Civil War. Abraham Lincoln's leadership during this period was crucial. Post-Civil War Reconstruction 1865-1877. Efforts to rebuild the South after the war and address civil rights issues took place during this era. Gilded Age 1877-1896. Rapid industrialization, urbanization, and economic growth characterized this period. Innovators like Thomas Edison and Andrew Carnegie emerged. Progressive era 1896-1917. Social reforms, women's suffrage, and labor movements gained momentum. Theodore Roosevelt's presidency marked this era. Great Depression and World War II 1929-1945. The stock market crash of 1929 led to the Great Depression. World War II followed, with the US playing a significant role. Post-World War II era 1945-1964, the US became a global superpower, engaging in the Cold War with the Soviet Union. Thanks for watching.